So yeah, nice to be back here for the School of Nursing, Psychotherapy, Community Health. And as Amanda mentioned, I'm the Academic Integrity Officer at TEU for only more than 10 months. So I'm similar as you, learning a lot about Gen AI and academic integrity and assessment design. So I hope this would be an ongoing conversation. And I know because Gen AI is evolving constantly, it's going to be an evolving conversation as well. So what I'm going to talk about today, I have around 25 minutes. So this is the agenda for my presentation today. I think somehow the first question related to Gen AI shouldn't be focusing only on Gen AI. We have to go back all the way to the root cause, which is effective assessment design. So if we have robust assessment design at the first place, maybe Gen AI is no longer that an issue. And then after talking some principles related to assessment design at the first place, we're going to move on a little bit to focus on Gen AI. So specifically, I'm going to talk about designing out strategies, which is, if you're familiar with designing out, maybe you are more leaning towards designing out because you want to make the assignments harder for students to complete using unauthorized Gen AI use. And we're going to talk about the strategies like that and also share some examples with that as well. And then after that, we're going to talk about designing in strategies, which is allowing students to use Gen AI appropriately, and then some examples of demoing that as well. And also, at the end, I'm going to provide you with a framework with 6 guiding questions for you to start thinking about. If you are designing your own assessment now, what are some key questions to think about in terms of assessment design in response to Gen AI? So again, I want to start with a quote by somebody from a UK school. It says, "Generative AI is not really the problem. It just makes the long-existing problem of traditional assessment design more urgent for us." If we think about traditional assessment design, can you think of any typical type of traditional assessment design? As written assignment, essays, and usually a final product, isn't it? But then with Gen AI, well, at the first place, essays may not be the best effective way to facilitate in the learning at the first place, and may not be the best way to show whether students have achieved the learning outcomes or not. And then meanwhile, we know some teaching staff, we understand they have a lot of heavy workload with research, and they want to repeat the same assessment format again and again, and using essay is effective. But meanwhile, writing is a really good way to help train students' critical thinking skills. But then Gen AI is telling us, well, it's probably not that effective to use the same traditional essay assessments as a final product for assessment design anymore, so we have to be more creative with that. Well, okay, since we're in DCU, I have some good news, nice news to share with you. As you can see in the hard copy in front of you, it is the DCU's in-house 12 principles of assessment design. So this is created actually before the launching of generative AI in 2022. It is talking about, for good assessment design, or if we want students to uphold academic integrity, we have to use robust assessment design to promote them better engage in the assessments at the first place. And then they're more likely to be engaged in the task, and then less likely to cheat or, plagiarize. Let me give you a brief explanation of the 12 principles. So the principles 1 to 3 are related to setting high standards to uphold academic integrity. But then after that, principles 4 to 12 are specific tips that you could use to make your assessment design more robust and more engaging for students to participate in the assessment's completion process. So for example, let's look at number 4. The font's a bit small. Sorry. That's okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Principle 4 is using rubric or marking criteria that reward positive behaviors of academic integrity. So I know that students care a lot about assessments and the rubrics and the mark, but then if we can go a little bit further, awarding behaviors, awarding behaviors to show academic integrity and award them with marks in the rubric design, maybe they're less likely to cheat and focus more on upholding academic integrity using probably accurate information and accurate format of their references and citations in their paper. So rubric is something that we can think about. Maybe if we want an urgent, quick short-term solution in response to GenAI, updating our rubric to facilitate the students' upholding of academic integrity could be a starting point for us as a short-term decision. And then principle number 7 is something we will also talk about, is the scaffolded assignment design. When we think about a big, long essay or research paper, it's really difficult, a big task. But if we can break that down into an outline, into annotated bibliography, into source evaluation, into first draft, we are making the harder assignments easily manageable by students, and then we're also engage them more in the learning process as well. And of course, there are also principles related to co-designing assessments with students, giving students more choices. For example, just simply giving them both either an option of written or an oral format of the assessment submission would engage them more. So you see, when we tilt the direction of our assessment to students' own interest and personalized assessment, it's more likely they will be engaged and cheat less. This is just an example showing you of an upgraded rubric design to evaluate an annotated bibliography by Professor Scott in 2024. He kind of upgraded his rubrics to better respond to GenAI. And as we can see here, he put 20 points for citations, but then he further divided citations into 2 sets of criteria. Firstly, it's the correct formatting of the citation following the referencing style. And then secondly, it's focusing specifically on the accurate content in the cited information. And then let's give an example maybe of the accuracy of cited information in the second row here, highlighted in yellow. If we look at satisfactory level, it is talking about the cited information is somewhat accurate, and several important details are missing or incorrect. So if we think about the free version of ChatGPT, maybe 3.5, because it's not that updated, it still has problems of creating a reference that looks accurate but actually includes falsified information. So ChatGPT may fall into that only satisfactory level, or even worse, in the needs improvement level, when the cited information is largely inaccurate or incomplete, significantly affecting the integrity of the citations. Again, you may argue back, well, what if students use a paid version of ChatGPT-4? The accuracy increases significantly. Yes, we know that. So I think this is just an example to kind of inspire you to think further how you can respond to students using paid version to create their references, and then somehow capture their misuses of GenAI into your rubric performance criteria. Yeah. So that's all about the general background of thinking about the beginning point. It's still about our robust assessment design. And then moving on, I know the hot topic is the generative AI in terms of designing out and designing in strategy. DCU first provided our initial guidelines responding to GenAI's threat to our assessment design using a framework of either doing designing out GenAI or designing in GenAI. As mentioned earlier, designing out is making assessments harder for students to complete with unauthorized GenAI. Designing in is embracing GenAI and maybe use the benefits of GenAI to help students better achieve our learning outcomes. So in the next rest of the presentation, I'm going to share strategies and examples of both designing out and designing in. So I have 3 strategies for designing out. The first strategy, as we mentioned earlier in our principle, is the scaffolded or multi-stage assessment design, breaking down a big task into smaller pieces that's easier for students to manage. Maybe some of you are already doing it because I think you care about the students, care about their learning process. And just to give you a little further explanation about it, it is really focusing on the learning process instead of the final product. Yeah, so again, outline to evaluation sources, to annotated bibliography, to first draft. You guiding them throughout the whole learning process. And possibly you engage them more to come to your classes more frequently as well. But then secondly is the metacognitive process. So metacognitive process is thinking about their own learning, reflect further about how they learn, what else do they need to improve to polish their learning. So one example we can think about is maybe in the process. After completing an assignment in the learning process, you stop and pause and ask the students, what have you done so far? And what further challenges and further things you need to improve to move on to the next stage. So we pause them at the middle point and ask them to do some kind of reflection. That could be either a podcast reflection recording or some kind of written, depending on their own preference. But then you include that reflective element in it would be useful. And then thirdly also is when we have breaking down the assignment into smaller parts, we can engage students with more peer review activities where they learn from their peers. I'm thinking maybe we should do more peer review within our nursing school, because me, somehow as an outsider, but maybe you find more commonalities with people in the nursing school doing similar teaching modules, for example. And then also for the teacher as well, to track students' work in progress in the teacher-student review as well. This could be especially useful maybe when you're doing some kind of group work. So an example I want to show you here is the recommended by Columbia College. They are breaking down a research project or research assignment into 6 different stages. As you can see here, the 6 stages are selecting a topic, and then secondly, finding background information or pre-search. And then after that is research itself. And fourth is source evaluation using maybe annotated bibliography, critiquing sources. After that is draft, and after that is the final draft. It's just an example to show you how to break down a final research project, which could be useful, especially if you're teaching final year project or capstone project. So an example then, he provided several activities that you can do with students for each stage of the final research project. So an example I'd like to show you would be at the beginning you ask students to develop a research question, maybe a formative task for the beginning 1 week or first 2 weeks. And after that, asking students to do some kind of concept mapping to facilitate their research. This could be infographics or any kind of, again, format that students feel comfortable to do with. And then after that is the research log or journal to track their research trail. And after that is the critiquing the source or other type of, annotated bibliography. And then is a peer review of their first draft. And finally, a final draft. This is ideal, isn't it? Maybe you're thinking also, how can I implement all of the 6 activities in my pretty packed 1 semester module? Well, you don't have to do all of them. You can pick the ones that you think are most important to your learning outcomes and to most tailored to your students' needs. So designing out strategy number 2 is oral type of assessments. I think maybe essay is good. It's no doubt written assignments is good, but maybe we can turn more focus on this type of oral communication skills that is needed and students maybe are weaker at, and then are very authentic still needed really at their workplace. So examples of oral type of assessments include interactive oral assessments, which is promoted by DCU, and I know our school staff are already using that. I'm going to explain that later, but then also some kind of Viva style of oral exams or presentations or podcasts. Maybe what's a good point to think now is instead of completely replace your written assessment with oral exams, you can put some oral element to complement your writing assessments. Could be a good starting point. And of course, we always know probably if we talk to students, about their assignment, if students are able to articulate, produce their answer verbally, it's a good sign that they have really achieved the learning outcomes and did the work originally. So again, as a person from TEU, it's good to promote interactive oral assessment. But again, I'm not saying you completely have to do it. I just hope that knowing a little bit more about interactive oral help you to better integrate some oral element in your own course. So interactive oral assessment is an assessment format created by colleagues from Griffith University from Australia. So to summarize in a short sentence, as you can see here highlighted in red, an interactive oral is a genuine, unscripted, synchronous conversation between an assessor and a student, or between a group of assessors and a group of students, around an authentic workplace scenario. Could be done face-to-face or online. So what I feel interesting about it is when we think about conversations, that's really an authentic task we do every day and also do in our workplace. And this could be especially useful if we are teaching some kind of disciplines that are very practical, maybe business or psychotherapy, nursing, because it's all about communication with people at a real working place. So it is quite authentic. And again, students need more training and practice on oral skills. So what I'm going to show you next is an example that Ray O'Neill has put in his psychosexuality class. Thanks, Ray, for sharing your class content and videos with me. So I'm going to talk about it and let you reflect on it. Interactive oral in a psychosexuality class, Nursing 5036. So this is for a very sensitive topic, talking about sexuality for psychotherapy class. And the interactive oral assessment is designed to be the student's clinical psychosexual practice, which counts for 40% of the continuous assessment. And again, as we mentioned earlier, what is interactive oral in the syllabus? It says two-way discussion, utilizing a clinical-based example to ground a free-flowing discussion. So unscripted, real-world situation relating to a clinical case that the student has conducted a clinical experience with a client or a client couple. And then the discussion is lasting around 25 minutes. And then the teacher or the assessor is using the discussion to evaluate students' learning of the theories and practice in the psychosexuality class, as well as evaluating students' own clinical experience and evaluating students' own reflection. Reflection both on how they relate the theories they learned from class to inform their clinical practice, as well as reflection of themselves as a trainee therapist. So it's quite packed, assessment, trying to achieve a variety of learning outcomes for both the course, for the practicality, for the reflection, which I find is quite, robust assessment design. And in terms of the components, at the beginning, the students present to the assessor a psychosexual dimension from their clinical experience, summarizing what they have done in the clinical experience. But then after that, it's an ongoing, unscripted conversation for students to outline and reflect on their work, experience, and knowledge garnered through their psychosexual module, has assisted their working with this client or facilitated their stronger clinical engagement. Again, stronger clinical engagement is focusing both on reflection on the clinical practice as well as students' own reflection of themselves being a trainee therapist. Students should critically, again, these are specific things that the students should focus on relating to the learning outcomes, critically deliberate on biological, psychological, social factors that can influence or contribute to psychosexual difficulties. And apart from that, they should also appraise integrative psychotherapy theories and practice they have drawn on or would draw upon. There's this level of reflection again. So it's quite a lot of information. I hope I do justice by summarizing what you have done for your course. So when I was thinking about Ray's case, I tell myself, what did Ray do before the interactive oral assessments? I would suppose it would be a written assessment, right? You do the same thing, you achieve the same learning outcomes with a written assessment. But then I keep thinking further, what does interactive oral bring more from just the written assessments? Well, the first thing, of course, they are psychotherapy students. And oral communication is a very essential skill for them to grasp when they want to enter into the workplace. But then secondly is what Ray shared with us in our community of practice of interactive oral. It's talking about sexuality and sex comfortably and professionally. And students can do that by doing this interactive oral assessment. And it was extremely rewarding for the teacher to witness that for the students. And I think students also enjoy that experience. So I think that's just something really good to reflect on. Finally, the designing out strategy, maybe we are already doing it, is some kind of different assessment modes, right? When we think about different modes, could be a video, could be an audio, could be something called audio-visual, where students talk through each one of their PPT slides and record it together to submit to you. But then secondly is our reflections. We can ask students to collect their reflections throughout learning a course by putting their reflections in infographics, in images, videos, or text into our e-portfolio. And in DCU, we're using Loop Reflect as our e-portfolio. I know maybe some of you are already doing that for your nursing courses. If you're not familiar with Loop Reflect, I'm not sure if you are familiar with Mahara, that's the original form of the e-portfolio that we create Loop Reflect based on. This is an example I just found yesterday from a nursing course 112-2020. I don't know if that happens to be your student, but I did remove her image. But I find this really interesting to look at the first place. You have 3 columns layout of content. You have a mixture of Twitter screenshots, reflections, and then some kind of personal information. I just think if I were the student and if I'm really good at creating articraft, I would find this kind of assessment more engaging for me to do. And then also, there's something interesting about creating an artifact directly relevant to your own personal reflection. It's kind of your tree hole or something. There's something very personal about it. So if students really like doing this kind of assessment format, it's quite engaging for them and can also stimulate their creativity. So these are just some 3 strategies we shared so far related to designing out. Scaffolded assessment design, oral elements, and then also alternative formats or modes of assessments. Now moving on to our designing in strategies, similarly 3 main strategies I'd like to share with you today with a little bit examples with prompting, a little bit prompt examples to get you started if you're still learning about that. So again, when I think about this, I first think about what can we as teachers benefit from GenAI. Maybe just using GenAI tools to increase our teaching efficiency, knowing that teaching is quite consuming preparation time for us. So according to Aquaviva 2023, she is also doing nursing education, actually. She recommended several strategies of using generative AI to increase teaching or material creation efficiency, to create scenarios or case studies, for example, nursing vignettes. Secondly, to design interactive in-class activities. But also, I don't know if you're familiar, maybe when you're creating multiple choice questions, the most time-consuming part is to create those distractors. I think, feel free to disagree with me or any other part. So GenAI can help you increase the exam question creation efficiency. So feel free to try it out and feel free to disagree afterwards. So they can also create short answer, essay, clinical reasoning questions. And also generate maybe lecture script for you as well. Maybe you give them PPT slides and then ask it to generate relevant lecture script for you. So you don't have to start from scratch and you have something to work on. The link below, Aquaviva 2023, there gives you a very detailed presentation slides explaining each one of the 4 things I've just mentioned, explaining and provided example prompt formats for you, and example prompt for you, to help you create scenario, generate questions. So feel free to check that out. She was doing nursing education herself. But also, we have somebody in our Institute of Education there's this website called poe.com, Poe.com, and you can train your own generative AI bot. So what the teacher did is she feed the generative AI with the course syllabus and the assignment brief, and ask students to ask the teaching assistant bot, Mary, for any general questions related to assessment and the syllabus, so it saves her a lot of time. Again, it's for you to think about, but of course you also have to think about, is it kind of intruding some kind of, confidential information in your course? If not, maybe you have to think about how to filter certain information with Gen AI, but then still make it functional as a teaching assistant for your students. So so I think to make it even more engaging instead of just a theory, I'm going to show you this example ChatGPT prompt that you could use to create a nursing case study. I'll give you maybe 30 seconds to read through it, okay, to have a feel of that. So go ahead. So it's quite detailed, isn't it? Because you have to give it very detailed instructions about treating a patient with congestive heart failure, and then put the learning outcomes so in a way that Gen AI can better help you tailor the guiding questions to better help students achieve the learning outcomes. All the red words you see here is like a template that Aquaviva provided. So your job may be just to copy that template and then fill in the patient information with more details and give and see how Gen AI will respond to you back. So I think this is something quite interesting. And again, Aquaviva there provide more prompt templates you could use for different types of assessment or scenario generation. This is another example prompt to create, formative test or exam or quiz questions using Copilot, and the before version of that was Microsoft Bing. This is created by Ethan Mollick and Lila Mollick from Wharton Interactive, from Wharton School of Management. What they really want to do in their Wharton Interactive is to try to innovate teaching by using simulations, games, and embracing Gen AI tools. So that link here gives like a 5-part crash courses for teachers and students to use Gen AI to improve learning and improve teaching. So this is from their video part 4 related to how to use Gen AI to increase your teaching efficiency. So maybe again, 20 seconds to read through the prompt to see how they, play around with Gen AI, with teaching, with creating tests. So I think again, it's very detailed instruction telling it exactly what it has to do. But I highlighted something in red at the beginning. It's giving Gen AI a specific role. So after giving it a specific role, like it's asking it here, you're a quiz creator of highly diagnostic quizzes, so it can context or tune it better. I sometimes use Gen AI saying, you are academic integrity officer, specifically creating resources and workshops for enhancing university staff's teaching practice. I mean, it's a machine. It needs a lot of guidance for you to guide it. So a screenshot taken from their video. Let me quickly explain that to you. So they're doing this on Microsoft Edge, the web browser. So they can access the Wikipedia page. So that's why in the previous prompt you see the word web page. And then on the right column is the chat box. Basically, it's a Copilot chat box. It's the way you give generative AI instructions. So they chose the creative mode for Bing Chat back then, or Copilot, telling them what it needs to do. And then at the same time, they can show generative AI the web page on the left-hand side. Okay, so they can ask ChatGPT, the quiz generator, to create several multiple choice questions together with correct answers based on the content from that particular Wikipedia page. But then if we think about generative AI such as ChatGPT, we may not have them be able to access a web page, but then we can download that web page into a PDF or a Word document and submit it to Gen AI. and then guide it to create quiz later on. So it's different ways we can do the same result. Yes, and also there are people practicing nursing education using images. Maybe in a way, I remember a podcast of a nursing educator talking about images stimulate a lot of their emotions, of their like soft values in their profession as a nurse, but also just give them more authentic and interesting, engaging moments. This is supposed to be a patient suffering from COPD, but then there are some problems with the indexes, the figures on the machine. And that would be an interesting teaching moment for students saying, okay, what would be some kind of abnormal about the figures here? You know, and then you discuss further about it, and maybe you can also, you know, revise your image to make it include further elements, some kind of machines around the patient to make it again a nursing vignette for students to talk about. But I do have to share with you, it took me maybe multiple trials beforehand to create a proper image of that. When I tried to say a woman have swelling legs, suffering from, you know, diabetes type 2, the swelling leg doesn't look like a human leg. So, you know, you have a lot of fun trying that, but I mean, you are also can feel a bit frustrated finding the most relevant or authentic images. And people were also joking that Gen AI doesn't do the hands right, doesn't do the legs right or feet right. So again, pros and cons for Gen AI is the way we should treat it and teach it to our students. And then secondly, is designing it to increase students' learning efficiency. Just to give you some brief strategies without examples here. Brainstorm ideas. You know, you can ask students to, at the beginning of their research process, what are some possible research topics or questions related to treating a patient with type 2 diabetes, something like that, and it will give you some starting point. Secondly, to generate a structure of a report, you know, what's a typical example of a nursing report, specifically reporting which type of, you know, disease. And then thirdly is raw large quantity of data. This could be useful if you have a lot of processing of data or calculations to do. An example of it would be something called Wolfram Alpha. It's really good at increasing the speed to running regressions. So that's will be more technical data processing perspective. And then in terms of research, there are some Gen AI-powered research tools. I don't know if you attended Anna Meal's session. She mentioned about Elicit. Elicit is the Gen AI, I would say, platform that's supporting all of these Gen AI-powered research tools. So Elicit can access most of the published articles in the public. The benefit of it is it has large amounts of articles that it can access. But the problem with it is it can't access articles behind paywalls. But then it does speed up the article research process. So one strategy we could start thinking about is complement our traditional data search together with the AI-powered search tools. Maybe you use traditional database to find some quality papers at the beginning, and then use them as what we call seed papers to feed into Gen AI-powered tools and help you generate more articles. Finally is, of course, using tools such as Grammarly to revise grammar. Last but not least, finally, the strategy 3 for designing in is to, knowing that Gen AI already produce quite decent responses, but also it has flaws as well. We can integrate Gen AI output into our teaching process and ask students to interact with the Gen AI output, critique on it, evaluate on it, or maybe revise on it. So I'm showing you the Bloom's taxonomy again. The top 3 levels of Bloom's taxonomy focuses on like analysis skills, evaluation skills, creation skills, which are quite difficult skills to grasp. Maybe for year 3 and year 4 students, we can somehow introduce Gen AI to further polish their higher order skills. So 3 strategies here. Firstly, critique Gen AI response. Critique the accuracy of the response, the authenticity of the response in the context of the key course theories, key course concepts we have learned. Or secondly, this is something I also shared in our FSH AI Day. Secondly is you as a teacher use GenAI to generate some example answer for student assignment. And then before students do the assignment themselves, ask them to use your given rubric to evaluate GenAI's example, give it a mark. This is a good process to increase students' assessment literacy. And then you ask them to do the assessment of the students themselves so they would have a better grasp of the assignment. And then finally, allow students to use GenAI, but then students have to provide the prompt and also show to you via track changes and comments in the Word document what changes they have made and why do they make those changes. So it's really good because the last example is focusing on the creation part, right? Not only do they have to critique, evaluate, but also have to revise and create their own response. The final example I want to show you is from our psychology school from Dara McCashin. He was teaching the critical thinking, collaboration, and enterprise skills class. So to make that short for you, what he did is he asked the students to pick a popular media news of their topic of interest. So they can pick any topic they would like, but it needs to be a news published in the popular media. And then he asked students to do three things. First thing, students have to evaluate and critique the news themselves, use their own brain. But then secondly, they ask GenAI, they use GenAI and save their GenAI chat history to ask GenAI to critique the same news article. And then the third process is the reflection process. Students reflect further two things GenAI did well to help with critiquing, as well as two things GenAI failed to do to help with the critiquing. So again, I think it's really good to engage GenAI, teach higher order skills, and include some element of reflection. But then, of course, if you do design in, two things you need to do is educate students about the ethical use of GenAI. Ethical in terms of privacy issues, copyright, misinformation, dominant stereotypes and views, environmental concerns. Environmental concerns is a big concern related to sustainability. If we think about it needs so many energy to keep running the background parameters data, billions of them, and they use a lot of electricity and also water to cool down the machines, to keep running the machines. So I heard some news that people think the future of the competitiveness of GenAI tools is not on the technology, but also on the energy part. University College Cork created a very useful, I think, toolkit related to ethical use of GenAI. You can click it on there. I put it in our DCU shared drive. It's a PDF document. It used very easy to understand language to explain what is GenAI, what are some key terms related to GenAI that you can share with your students, and the critical GenAI literacy part. It explains, for example, what is deep learning in a very easy to understand way? What is generative AI in a very easy to understand way? And finally, of course, the second part, clearly communicate to your students about your expectations of their GenAI use. Citations specifically, and we have Cite Them Right, GCU has access to guide students. The BROFS framework, which I think Amanda will share with you later, is a good 6 guiding questions for you to start thinking for yourself how you're going to help revise your assessment in response to GenAI. I'm going to leave that to you to read in your discussion part. And finally, these are contact information of me doing academic integrity officer, my colleague Lily Gurm, who supports the interactive oral community of practice, and finally Nolan O'Keefe, maybe some of you already know her, doing our e-portfolio support. This is the discussion question I want to leave you with. These are a summary of all the strategies I've mentioned, and 2 questions I think good for you to maybe think further, where there might be opportunities within your modules to implement some of the principles, to improve your assessment robustness. And secondly, what resources, training, or support do you think you need to help upskill you to better achieve those goals?